I don't normally feel I need to show my qualifications to speak, but my mother sent me this picture a few years ago indicating that in 1964, when this was taken, that this gentleman here is myself, and this is my first retrofit with my brothers and my dog Wiggletail, who is known as the missing link. We weren't sure whether he was a dog or a skunk, but he was otherwise a good dog. So I think the best shoes I ever had.
Yeah, I was going to say, they're nice.
They're hand-me-downs from my deadbeat brothers. But,
no, those are good kicks, man. That's rocking the old school kids there. That's very cool.
You look like you're texting.
yeah, I'm playing with matches.
You're checking to see if there's any phenols in it. Burns, there's phenols.
One of my favorite activities, though, seriously, is retrofitting, and I kind of mentioned that's kind of a big part of your recipe, but it's a very creative activity to do, and so we're going to talk about it. We've talked about it a little bit so far. We'll start out about where are the best opportunities to put in retrofits in the urban landscape, and there's a lot of different options. This is one that I did a fair amount earlier in my career. And essentially, you have a storm drain pipe that's outfalling directly to a stream. And there's a couple different options. You can basically break up the pipe, create a treatment area, and then bring it back in at another location. There are some regulatory issues. You want to generally try to stay out of the floodplain. But the further you capture down the storm drain, the more drainage area you can pick up. So you're kind of, that's one solution. Another way to do it is where you have a manhole. You can split the flows, so you're just most storm drains are designed to carry which flow in Pennsylvania? 10-year storm usually. So the water quality storm is an inch. So a flow splitter, you get to keep the capacity of the pipe for the big storm, and you're just splitting the smaller storms into a treatment area. So that's one option, and one that I've used quite a bit in my career. And essentially what you're looking for is really two things: a storm drain pipe and some abundant area near the storm drain. You like it to be generally flat. If you have a steep stream valley, you usually just can't find enough. You've got to dig. And when it comes to retrofitting, the biggest cost of retrofitting is excavation. The pipes and all the plumbing, it can add up, but it's the excavation. So where you have to dig a big hole, it drives up the cost. So that's kind of the theme we'll follow. So this one is good. The other area that we often do is we love open channel drainage where you don't have a storm drain pipe. In a lot of rural communities, and even some older cities and hamlets, have these essentially swales, ditches, and there's a lot of ways to split the flow to an adjacent area to improve their treatment, create a wet swale or a dry swale. It depends on the water table elevation. But again, in terms of digging, somebody's already dug the channel. So you're just digging a little bit more, making it a little deeper, or digging a little bit more to the side. So it's a pretty good option. The downside is usually when you think about swales, they're fairly narrow. You maybe have the swale or maybe 5–10 feet until you get to a highway or somebody else's private property line. So it's kind of a narrow linear corridor, so you may not have enough storage to make it work. The other area I love, I'm such a geek, is I was driving up here and go, wow, it's an enormous parking lot. What a great candidate for retrofit. it was the largest parking lot in eastern Pennsylvania. Where you see the large parking lots, if you have a big lot and a blob of pervious area, you're immediately attracted to that, saying, I can take all that runoff and I have a place to treat it. So you can figure out what to do. And these are all new facilities, new retrofits. There's another class of existing retrofits that are probably more cost effective, but there'll be options like this. Last year we had our first Best Urban BMP in the Bay Award contest, the Bubbas. Hopefully some of you voted in that contest. And I hope you're proud because the winner was not some highfalutin District of Columbia or Maryland. Who was it, Cecilia?
Well, in the 2014 contest, it was in Pennsylvania. It was the Lancaster Brewing Company Traffic Calming Green Streets project.
Which
Many
is
of you have heard that.
one of the sites that I changed to on our tour. Make sure that we're actually going to have dinner there and tour that site because it is above a winner.
Very nice. They also have some nice brews.
And they have great brew.
That plays no impact whatsoever on the final voting. But the reason I bring that up is Lancaster is an urban area, but it's not Baltimore where this Green Street was. So a lot of people in smaller cities go, Green Streets are a big city thing. I think the beauty of the Lancaster project was, hey, they had a number of problems, including traffic calming and a bad intersection and whatnot, and they were able to use Green Streets to make it. So a lot of different options, but again, it's like that swale. There's a lot of competition for who gets that right-of-way of the street. Whether it's utilities, whether it's the adjacent property owner, whether it's parking and so forth. So the only thing I would say about Green Street retrofits is if the first or second time you do it, you're going to have more headaches than, because you're having to get all sorts of local agencies and state highway and other groups to give their approval to something you're not used to. Now the district, Montgomery County, and other parts of the watershed, Green Streets are about 20% of all streetscaping projects, so they've gone mainstream. But the first few projects were very difficult. We talked about these briefly this morning, about on-site retrofits or homeowner BMPs, whether it's rain garden, rain barrel, conservation landscaping, or others. And so that's kind of I mean, there's other opportunities, but that's pretty much what you have for new facilities. And of course, as you're looking at public land for retrofit opportunities, schools, parks, stream valleys, municipal buildings, municipal parking lots, those areas you control. Private land is fairly questionable because then you have to pay for the access and people will be happy with that. And anytime you have to buy land for a retrofit, it's not only digging a big hole, but it's paying for the land. So you're immediately attracted to, well, what about all those areas that are already devoted to stormwater but aren't working very well? And those are the existing BMPs. And the expert panel came up with 3 different options. And the first is BMP conversion. And this one is, these opportunities are just massive. Here's a dry pond. I'd love to be a dry detention pond. It's one of my fantasies in life. And why is it my fantasy? Because a dry detention pond only has to work once every 2 years. And that's it. In between, they don't work at all. And that's kind of my dream. But
I want to be a dry detention.
my mama said you've got to work, young man, so that's why we convert them so they can be things like constructed wetlands with extended detention. This was actually the very first retrofit that I did in 1987, called the Rolling Stone retrofit, although Keith Richards was not involved in the project whatsoever. So if we have an existing basin, what are our strategies? Well, they often say in engineering, you can either raise the bridge or lower the river, and that's essentially what we do. The first option is if here's our pond, we can dig down and create more storage and use that storage for something like a permanent pool or a sand filter or even a bottom retention area. So that makes usually a lot of sense to do, but then you have to do a little bit of geotechnical work, or at least dig a test hole to see whether the water table has risen up there, or whether it's compacted, or what the soils are like. So that's one option. The other option, to get more storage, is to raise the embankment and make that higher. So that way, I'm creating a bigger hole without having to dig down. The third option is what we call modifying the riser. And this is one of my favorite. This is so old stormwater. It's like, to me, like a Klingon stormwater cooking device. It has all of the things that let's have a concrete channel to heat up the water and get it out immediately for no treatment. So this is probably the least hard-working PMP of all time. But it also kind of shows our history of stormwater detention. Which 3 storms does this control? Give me a 2. Give me a 10. Give me 100. And actually, this might be a 2, 10, 50, and maybe 100 year for the spillway. And back then, we knew how to model stormwater, but we didn't realize that this was just not a functional thing. So if we don't need 50-year detention anymore, which our new modeling shows us, if we provide 2 and 100, we've got it. And we pretty much control everything in the middle. Then maybe we can sacrifice some of the 50-year storage and use that for stormwater treatment. And we do have to do a fair amount of rejiggering and modeling and whatnot, but that's a pretty good opportunity for the older ones. And that lastly, we can trade storage. We don't want to talk about that. So here's some real-world examples of retrofits. An old dry detention basin, inlet here, outlet there. It's a sand filter, but with a grass surface, and then an infiltration gallery near the embankment. And because it was only like a 5-acre facility, the whole issue of infiltrating, normally an injury, but infiltrating near an embankment, that's heresy. But it works pretty well. And there's another example of adding a bioretention facility. You can't really see it, but there's 2 or 3 feet of filter media. So that's an option. So we can convert it from one type to a higher performing type. The second is PMP Enhancement. And I never was able to find a good set of slides, but we take something with a very short hydraulic residence time and change the geometry so that we can...
That's not the same facility, is it? Just kidding.
Sometimes you can be so literal.
Just kidding. Just making sure you're awake.
And then finally, there's PMP Restoration. This was kind of a controversial one because all the folks at EPA said, you can't get credit for maintaining things. And I go, yeah, you shouldn't get credit for routine maintenance. But if you go back to an old facility, I think I showed you this one that's filled in halfway, and you recover and dredge it so it's, it has twice as much storage as it had before, then it's an allowable credit. And because we have a lot of older ponds, particularly wet ponds, we were able to get them to agree to that. So those are our options. We'll go through some examples about how to credit them. But why I love retrofitting is it really requires some sleuthing about how to make things work at highly constrained sites. So you have to envision the possibilities for restoration at the very time you're anticipating potential project killers. So you have this kind of bipolar attitude. Wow, we could do some neat things here, but oh man, there's a 36 sewer line running through it that can't work. Or wow, you could put a pool here, but those are mature trees, the neighborhood would get really upset. So you have to keep both of those things in mind. So, Cecilia, are you ready?
I am so ready.
We're going to, she's going to lead us in, yeah, sound like you're ready at all. Will you stand up?
I'm doing something? Okay.
Here we are, we're envisioning restoration. We're going to give you a chance to,
Oh, me? Okay.
well, you will help them because they're the brains of the group.
The audience, the participation section.
All right, here's our first example.
We're going to retrofit it, maybe.
Envisioning, so again, this whole bipolar thing of envisioning the possibilities, envisioning deal killers. Let's get,
Do we want to run through it once, or we just want to jump in? They know what they're doing, right? What do you guys see here as a potential retro? Like, what are the goods or the bads about this? Anything to shout about?
It's a grassy area.
Nice big open space.
It'll take us 2 years to get permits from PennDOT to do it.
Let's assume it's a township road.
very well.
I thought that was very good. That's one of those project
Or a
killers.
parking area.
Right.
Well, we'll give you a little bit of background on this first one just to get you started. We have several more examples, but we want to get you involved rather than us. This is a highway cloverleaf, and this has about 5 acres of roadway drainage going in to this storm drain as well as a couple of others. And
So there's infrastructure there. That's good. We can work with that.
and there is, within the circle, there's no other competing land uses.
No utilities.
No utilities in this case, we'll imagine that.
No
Well,
trees.
because it's roadway runoff, water quality PMP would be my first thought.
So you're envisioning possibilities, you would dig a big,
Something,
Yeah.
All right.
depression filled with bioretention or filter, depending upon.
Where's it flowing to now?
it's flowing in here, and then I believe,
Is there a creek over there? Looks like a bridge or something there, right, where those 2 cars are.
you have outstanding
X-ray
vision.
vision.
We'll just assume that it's dropping through, going through a storm drain, and hooking up to another storm drain. It's not uncommon for cloverleaf.
Yeah, expand on what Tom said, you put a pond or a wetland in there with a forebay, some type of forebay treatment, and then direct it into a wetland or a rolling pond, and then another diversion out the other side on high rain events into the creek, and maybe that's your 100-year flow. Certainly looks like you have enough room in there to capture
Yeah.
almost every rain event you're gonna see except a 100-year flow.
Right. And okay, so I think we've identified a potential project. What are some potential, what we won't call them project killers, but things that we would have to justify to the, let's say this is a local highway project.
Yeah, something that would.
Maintenance.
Maintenance,
The-
so
the
who's gonna
pipes are-
maintain it?
Yeah, the pipes are underground, they don't worry about them now.
Right. And I guess our only argument there is if we've designed, let's say, a constructed wetland, your mowing crews aren't going to have to mow this 20 times a year, which they're doing now. So that might win the case, but probably not. What are some other things that guy, we call him Bubba, who sits there, he actually doesn't win awards.
Not the bubble.
He sits there and has this drop-down list of why he can't do something.
Who's paying for it?
Who's paying for it? Well, let's say you're paying for it. And then he goes to maintenance, which is the next one, and then he goes to mosquitoes. And then he goes, if you go down and scroll to so many things that you get befuddled. But there are some things that from highway, what do they worry on this limited sight distance? So you would just have to make sure that, that usually means 10, 15 feet limits. If they gave them an option of a wet pond that was deep versus a constructed wetland that was shallow, they would probably say, well, what about the guy who the drunk who crashes his car into the wet pond. That's a liability for us, so they might prefer the other option. What are maybe a few others?
No, like water, no roadways typically. Like if you were gonna have a pond.
No, that's our first exercise. All
We're
right.
gonna do a couple more like that.
Do one more here. Okay, I'm going to describe the situation and let Cecilia run it. Residential development, road, existing channel, drop inlet to a storm drain pipe, provides stormwater detention for the 10-year storm. And that's all that it is. This is community open space. It's a pretty easy one.
Are there any problems, runoff problems in the neighborhood?
Right now, pretty much dry as a bone, although there's a little bit of standing water right up there.
Mhm.
He can confirm it for me because he has X-ray vision. Let's say they're high income and their first community instinct is mosquitoes, ticks, stuff like that. They probably don't want any more standing water, so we'll give that part of the scenario.
What can we do
If no one
here?
else answers,
We'll go for it.
yeah, nice grass swale, vegetated swale in there that doesn't have standing water, engineered,
An enhanced swale.
enhanced, thank you, enhanced.
Do some check dams, they could have
Mhm.
standing water, a little bit.
You've got your
But
inlet already
planted,
to
and you
tie
got
in.
your slope.
You've got your inlet to tie into, so that's good. Helpful.
Yeah, this is, we gravitate towards a site like this. I myself would probably use a dry swale rather than an enhanced swale because that one with turf surface, but you get the underground treatment. You have the under drain so it doesn't have a standing water. That was an easy one. We're kind of getting you ready, we'll give you a more complex. You want to tell her about this site?
Look at this site. Do I want to tell them about this site? Well, it's an existing basin. It's full of sediment. What would you do there?
Remove the sediment.
That's one, yeah.
Yeah.
So the water's already going there. We already have the space for stormwater management. Presumably we have infrastructure.
You can do all kinds of things there.
We can do all sorts of things. We just gotta dig it out first.
FBI case.
It's an FBI, right?
Very
For
good.
maintenance, very good. From a retrofitting, it could be any one of those three that he talked about, a conversion. It definitely has to be restored.
But we gotta find out where the sediment came from and make sure it doesn't continue.
Well,
Smart group.
yeah, this one, it came from two sources. This is an inlet right here, and you can't see the outlet. But many of the older generation of stormwater ponds had a stream system or a channel system above them. It was unprotected, so all the runoff from the impervious cover created a huge sediment load, which filled up the pond much quicker. Most ponds, as we talked about earlier, you'd expect them to have at least 25 to even 50 years of capacity. This one is 2 decades old and is full up. But if I were a neighbor resident, and you came in and had a better option for me than what I've got right now,
Yeah.
I take it.
I'd take it in New York minute. Another one perhaps?
Yeah. All right.
I think I saw the-
Don't answer. These are your favorites. I'm gonna just let you guys have at this. Obviously, it's a parking lot.
It's
With
empty.
your X-ray vision, what's on the other side of the
It's like rail.
Those look like containers or something.
Yeah, rail cars or something.
Yeah.
Or is that just fence? Is that
Fencing,
just
no,
stuff
is it
on the
fencing?
fence? Yeah.
Look at the
That
blue one.
school with an athletic field over there? or-
School, athletic field, fence, commercial rooftop.
Oh,
Or, no, those are pipes, it looks
What are
like.
the blue things, those gates?
I think it's part of the fence.
Don't worry about that, that's somebody else's land.
That's
Look
where you're
behind
supposed
the
to put
curtain.
advertising.
Well, this guy is clearly pointing to the gates.
I
Well, you got, first of all, you got thermal impact. I mean, you got all kinds of potential because you got real estate that's undetained, that's heats up, so you can do a variety of bioretention for a water quality benefit, for rate control, and for volume control.
And it's graded in that direction, is that
Yeah,
correct?
looks like
Can
it.
you
Yeah.
guys tell?
Like this, like to that, oh, that way. I was thinking that corner,
It's hard
yeah.
to tell sometimes with these pictures.
Center of the field.
It's already
Looks like it's
going.
graded towards the athletic field.
Yeah, it's basically from here down, but
Yeah, you need to see
Trying to
it.
put some retention in the end, at the end there, not
Mhm.
picking it up there to allow it to dissipate down to the ground and that. I'm assuming right now we probably run flooding something. so-
Probably muddy over there, yeah.
So it's money, no object.
We'd never build a parking
Yeah.
lot like that today.
No.
no, but there's no shortage of them
You-
that we've seen in the past. And this is, you know, the older parking lots, the first thing we'd say is, why is it empty?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's
Yeah, if it is,
empty
it's
a
empty all
huge
the time.
amount, it gives us a couple of options.
Takes
We
the blacktop
can't get
out.
rid of the whole blacktop, and maybe we get rid of half of it.
Right.
Or it gives us more room to put in something at the bottom. It's actually, this is like a blank slate. There's dozens of different options that we can do. Perimeter, in parking lot islands in the middle, sand filters, all sorts of different options.
But when you look at your whole suite of potential retrofits, you know, maybe you'll say, well, yeah, we could do a lot more, but it'll be more cost effective to just do bioretention over in the grassy area where all the drainage is already going.
The other thing I would keep in mind is, let's say this is a really old parking lot and they're coming back to you for a redevelopment project, and you would ask them to make an upgrade to whether it's permanent pavement or, you know, some other practice. Do you have a question?
Could you talk a little bit about, if you were gonna put islands in there, rather than just curbing the islands, allowing them to collect the runoff? I mean, we seem to have a lot of projects where we get rid of impervious and turn it into green, that doesn't collect anything but the rainwater that falls on it. How much better is it to use those new pervious green areas for water quality and to collect runoff, not just the precipitation that falls on them? And we have a lot of new parking lots that the islands are islands. There's nothing that gets to them except for rainwater.
Yeah, it's, I'm not sure who invented the parking lot island, but I'm not sure I would like them very much, because they created an expensive feature that does nothing at all except keeping cars from colliding. And so, you know, nobody in the year of our Lord 2015 should be doing parking lot islands that don't have, that aren't bioretention areas. And every square inch of, you know, if they're already doing that, yeah, this is a lot of different options of this one. Let's go to the next one. Oh, back to campus. This is,
So what do you see about this site? Good or bad, anything?
It doesn't look like it's that wet when people walking on it, so, I mean, if they're using that as a dry swell going through there, you'd be easy to put some bioretention underneath it in a couple of different areas for any heavy rain events.
Plant trees everywhere.
Plant trees, and it brings up another good point that there are already some trees, so that might be, probably don't wanna lose any of them, they're pretty
Right.
big. So maybe space constraints.
Judging by the hill on the right, you're probably gonna have to prepare for some capacity.
The water's already, good thing about it, the site is the water's already headed there, so that's a good thing.
yeah, and this is sort of, normally depression is something to be treated.
We like it. We like it in stormwater.
Depression is like quite a bit in the retrofit world.
I think that's the first time I heard that one.
That's a good one.
All right.
This is my favorite.
This is Baltimore County Drainage, 1960.
That is not a sidewalk, right?
That is not a sidewalk. That is a
Meant
concrete conveyance
Rip that
channel.
baby out.
Take
This
that.
this is cheaper than a storm drain pipe.
That's right, rip it out, that's right. Right there would be and enhancement, but I'm sure you could probably do more.
Probably some linear fire retention.
And skateboarders would like that.
That's
Some more skateboarders.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
That's true. Although there's no teenagers in this community, there's no graffiti on the channel.
Right.
Skate on rooftop.
I kind of look at this, you know, someone's talking about, it has to be a fixed capacity so we can increase the size of the channel, but here we have all this turf area that we're mowing. Nothing's happening there. We could plant trees, we could do treatment. Again, but there is proximity that makes it a good site.
A lot of areas, space to work with.
Well, I don't do it, yeah,
Yeah, this is another good one. So, we've got a 2-lane road, and I think this is an Arlington picture? Is this my picture or your
yes, your picture.
We've got the drive lane, the bike lane,
Trike lane.
the shoulder,
Parking.
and the gutter. We've got 2 islands in the middle, the striped area for no parking or driving. We've got storm drains in those middle areas, and the road is crested in the middle, so you get drainage going both to the inside and to the outside. So you got a storm drain here. I don't remember if there's one on that one. But you can see there's a little bit of standing water right there.
So the yellow, the area in yellow is not for parking
That's
or
for
for
not
driving.
parking or
That's
driving,
right.
you can easily open that up.
That's
So
right.
there it is. Easy
So
fix.
that'll get the drainage going on that half, right? You've already got those medians. so
The
you're
guys
rid
are
of
pretty
that.
good. The other thing I'd say is the constraints, there's a lot of underground utilities, and so where those are in relation, I'll tell you, but as I recall, there were none in that area, and I just find this, again, one of those knucklehead solutions that somebody said, well, we don't want to mow it, so we'll pave it, and then we'll paint yellow lines over it because you can't park here. You shouldn't drive. It's kind of a needless impervious cover that
So they were developed right after World War II. And their streets, everybody has a driveway, everybody's got parking on the streets, and the streets are about 46 feet wide. So they have a lot of impervious surface to work with.
Well, thank you. We'll have another opportunity to use the group brain in a few minutes. I think this is
Bless you, bless you.
a graduate class. Very good. Let's go quickly about the formal process for doing it. And I showed this slide earlier, so let's just go over its components. This is the Cadillac approach. There is another approach that if you don't have a lot of resources, it says just look at your existing stormwater detention facilities. If I have 50 of them, look at all 50 and do this analysis. But if you want to look at all your options, like you just did in those examples, you need to do a retrofit approach. First step is to not spend a lot of time or money, but spend a little time scoping. What do we want? What do the stakeholders want? What watersheds do we want to focus on? Are there some land uses like commercial or schools or public land that we want to focus on? And what of all the options that I showed you for retrofitting do we think work best in our community? And then once we get that information, it shapes what we do for the rest of the steps. And so then we go and do desktop retrofit analysis, where the big difference between when I started my career, all we had was USGS topo maps and soil surveys, right? We had terrible mapping. We didn't know what was underground as well. Now we have incredibly sophisticated mapping and GIS systems for almost anybody. I mean, there's still some communities that are missing data, but it's no longer a rarity to have. And I would just say Google Earth, if you don't believe what I just said. It used to be that acquiring aerial photography would cost you like $50,000 a pound. Now you can get it for free. So we look at the maps, and Cecilia's given some examples with illicit discharge detection, just figuring out with the layers you have which parts of your community might yield the most suitable retrofit sites. So some of the factors that we look at Aerial photos are probably what I like the best. Topography, so you know the low spots, hydrology, land ownership, land cover, storm sewers. You know, if I'm doing the non-Cadillac approach, just existing BMPs, outfalls and roads. You can do subset, add more. This is kind of what most people do. All right, we're ready to go again. What did we do in this exercise?
What was this slide? Envisioning? No, that was restoration. We're looking for opportunities using maps. Okay, so how would we?
Okay, so yeah, we're at our desktop. It's been like a year since we've done this workshop. So dementia has set in for me, and apparently Cecilia as well. With this commonly available mapping, what are you seeing in this photo? What do you think it is, and what opportunities do you feel it yields for retrofit?
So same approach with the IDDE, right? We want to focus our resources and our time in the field because that stuff is really time consuming and not bother with sites that won't be good retrofit potential. So let's find what we can using maps. And then we're going to need them when we go in the field too.
So what do you think this is?
It's a large undeveloped area that looks like it's a drainage for that community through there.
It's even more than that. You've got the drainage, it's undeveloped, and what do you think this feature is here?
Eagle eye?
That looks like an overflow. Is that like?
It's a riser overflow. So bingo, bingo, bingo here.
Ding, ding, ding.
In the middle of this map, at my desktop, I found a potential retrofit where, you know, I'm not going to retrofit these guys.
Individual.
It's got a big drainage area because, you know, we know these are quarter-acre lots or whatever. So it's a big area. It's dry. It's got a big rise. There's probably old flood control. And so it gives me all sorts of, so I'm so gravitated toward this that I mark it down on my list and say, let's go out in the field.
Water's already going there.
So it's kind of, where's Waldo?
Oh, right.
This one's a little bit more difficult. You're on your computer and you get this map. Where do you feel the retrofit opportunities would be that you would focus on? This is, you know, you're in a city, so you know.
This is the building here, right? And these are the crossroads. It's got a big parking lot. There's also another building and a parking lot there.
Are those buildings municipally owned?
Good question.
Good. That's one of the layers we
Well,
recommend.
for this assumption, we'll assume it is.
But that's one of the
Green
layers we
roof.
recommend is public lands.
He says green roof, which is the first recorded time in Pennsylvania where I've heard the term. So thank you very much. It'll never happen in this state. But you know, look at the green here. You know, so this would be an opportunity. And the point is, when you get to more urban areas, the opportunities tend to be a little bit smaller.
I'm going to be a gadfly here and just say rooftop recapture and reuse. In some cases, you can do that if it's needed. And
Yeah, if you had room for like a giant cistern,
on the roof.
yeah, or even not on the roof, you know, but collect it.
We'll collect
Parking
cisterns.
lot or something, there's a lot of retrofit.
Yeah, it's sort of one of the things that we're seeing in some of the other states is that, you know, let's say this was not municipal, this was a commercial building, and they've already got their permits and they're operating, there are no BMPs. We might provide them an incentive program to put in, you know, give them $2,000 or $5,000 to put in a bioretention on this unused area. Look at that. We've been seeing a lot of that. Let's do another one. And we can't do the clove release because you already solved that one so well.
That's pond to that development on the left.
And what kind of development in the watershed do you think
Well,
it
that should be a commercial land development.
Warehouse.
Carlisle.
Transport. So, huge rooftop area, big flood control. That's an easy one. How about this site? Where are you gravitating toward retrofit opportunities?
So the blue is the stream, Tom, up above?
Yeah, and the pink line shows a subwatershed boundary that is discharging to the stream of the white dots.
So I guess we're assuming that that's just road inlets going to urban conveyance system and then going to an outfall pipe there. There's nothing, no treatment system in between it.
Correct. This is the storm drain system to the outfall.
Those other
So what would you conclude immediately based on those two pieces of data about how old that project is?
Seventies probably.
Predates stormwater management in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania. Even the detention era. Which, boy, I had a big detention era when I was in high school.
Okay, creativity here.
It's a residential land use, right?
Is there any real estate in that sub-area that's municipally owned?
Possibly.
Pattern here.
We would check to see whether it's a Stream Valley Park or whether it was an easement provided by the developer for a buffer. Probably both are probable locations.
It's kind of hard to tell without a top on that, but I mean, with some of that open ground in between the outfall and the water, it's kind of wondering if you could put in some type of pre-treatment in there and then, you know, put in a detention pond or construct a wetland and then have everything flow to the stream after it's had a chance to have the nutrients or the metals or whatever. So,
Could look at the street, I mean, if it's that old, it might be kind of wide with parking places, maybe we could give up some parking places to put some of the green street features in there.
Yeah, like that.
Because they all drain right down the street, so,
Look at the size of that street.
They look pretty wide.
I think it's almost 50 feet
I mean, it
wide.
wouldn't be very many parking places.
And the thing is, when I see 50 feet wide streets with driveways and garages, you just go,
We need the parking.
well, you need the parking for the 100-year party. I'm rolling today.
Yeah.
Time to go home, sure.
I would also add, you could put a buffer on the street.
Yeah, this one is probably a good example of that first opportunity I showed of splitting the flow and trying to get some treatment in the floodplain. But having said that, you know, there are certain bells that would go off. What bells are going off in your head about project feasibility factors?
Well, there's probably some
Wetlands
utilities.
permits,
Yeah.
yeah.
And if you did the street one, there's probably some utilities.
forest conservation. You might have a buffer easement already where you can't take anything down, so you want to check all those out before you move to town.
I can't tell if there's any cover in there anyway, with that thing, as far as forest.
I think it's a winter shot, isn't it? Those are
Yeah.
defoliated trees there.
Mm.
Thing.
Going near the stream, probably not into.
Yeah, I mean, we can assume, I think, they're trees unless this was an Agent Orange dropping place.
There are areas that look like that.
Yeah.
All right, I think this, well, okay, first of all, what is this?
School.
This is where your children are right now, probably.
Racetrack.
Yeah, and we'll give you a little help. Well, actually, most of the flowing rooftop, parking lot, down to the stream, we're not sure. It's probably going underneath the field. Yeah, in fact, this is showing storm drain, so it's going underneath the field. So what is your first solution? That get rid of the school's football program and create a constructed wetland?
Yeah, right.
Plant lots of trees on the
And
field.
make sure the car is running.
Really helping your reelection.
What's circled in red, or in that red ball?
This,
Is that-
this is, the-
detention
like every high
pond?
school has, it's the courtyard, this is where the buses come in.
Okay, the
So
turnaround area.
essentially, this area is unutilized, except there's some vegetative cover where kids hang out and do the things we don't want them to do.
Is that Charlottesville?
kids are good in Charlottesville. I probably don't do it there. But yeah,
Well, you got opportunity under the parking, but I would first look at the area in red because it's unused, at least from a standpoint of infrastructure. As long as we were to design something or install something that would provide pedestrian access over it, probably would be okay there.
If you put a wetland in with mosquitoes, give the kids a reason to smoke there.
They won't smoke there anymore, right?
Yeah, so they can rationalize their nicotine use there as well.
wow, that's the best one I've heard so far. You could go here to here to here. But the other thing, and this is what I call, don't always try to get the big enchilada. You know, here's a school, there's 3 opportunities to put in a demonstration project. You're always attracted to how much impervious cover you can treat, but you know, high schools are intensively used places, and most of the square inches are already spoken for. But you do own them, and they're an opportunity for education and demonstration. So, and they're high visibility. Most people in the community who drive by your, let's say, bioretention on them.
Plus, it looks like we already delineated the drainage area to this for you.
We have a local high school that's actually putting in a rain garden.
Great.
And the kids will be, the young people, I guess, will be helping throughout the whole process. And then we're also talking about setting up a monitoring program to look at stormwater coming in and stormwater coming out to see what's actually being treated by the pond. So it's going to be.
That's cool.
Yeah. So they're really involved in it, and you're getting a whole generation of people now that are more stormwater literate than we're looking for.
So we're going to submit
And
it.
the moral of this story is this is an actual retrofit project in Charlottesville, depending.
Right, that's why I said that. They turned that into a gigantic fire retention. Actually, I showed you a lot of pictures of it in the first inspection session. And they had monitoring, like a sampler that was collecting data. They must be working with UVA or one of the universities to look at that information. But don't forget to encourage them to submit it for a BUBA in the future, our contest, if they do that.
Well, keep in mind, it's part of our NIFLA grant, so I'm sure NIFLA would enjoy getting the extra.
Attention. Yes.
Yeah.
Is that with the conservation district?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
That knows all about it.
Cool.
What's happening here, Tom? Is this the parcel boundary?
Yeah, somehow we haven't defined that yet.
Yeah, just to orient you, this is a bad photo. The stream is going through a farm, which is here. That's at the edge of incredibly over-designed cul-de-sac. I mean, think about this again. Not only do they, I mean, they did the token. We'll have an island in the middle, but they have a sidewalk going completely around. And how many of you have teenage kids? If this guy is leaving his house to go to the bus stop, of course, nobody goes to a bus stop anymore because their parents drive them to school. But, you know, any kid that walks completely around the sidewalk is probably going to get beaten up when he gets to the bus stop. I guess I should not say that before, because that's kind of a bullying thing.
Yeah.
But
You're
it's
right,
just
don't
so
cut
much-
across it, for sure. It's a lot of unnecessary impervious.
Which is really into better site design in the first place. It's an old subdivision, but you know, there's definitely some opportunities to get something on the edge. All right, I think that's it. Thank you very much, Cecilia.
You're welcome.
I always like to go through those exercises just because you kind of get, it forces you to realize that retrofitting is something you can do anywhere. It's just looking at the combination. So you do it in the field. In the field, you have the same information you just looked at. You confirm the drainage patterns, look at the retrofit potential, look for the deal killers. You develop a conceptual design, and I don't like this slide because it's kind of a Photoshop and really fancy. And this is much more than I would do in an initial thing, but you basically say, okay, I think this is my sketch for what I can do on this parking lot. Here's a quick description, and save that information. You know, so you end up having 20 or 30 or 40 of these, which you compile into a retrofit inventory of potential projects, and then you winnow you go through a ranking process to winnow them down to the projects that you want to build. So to do that, you need to get your data, put it in a database, and you come up with some kind of scoring system to rank the projects. We usually use some pretty simple factors like how much impervious acre you treat, property ownership. Sometimes if you have stakeholders in the community, you let them set the weights of what they think is important. So 5 points for habitat, 10 points for cost, whatever. And when they come up with the ranking factors, and after they're all scored, then they're usually much more supportive of it. That creates your prioritized list. You then want to see whether all the projects on your list can meet your subwatershed objectives for removal. And I'll go through how that's done in a minute. Design and construction, inspection and maintenance. And if you're going to go for retrofitting, I wrote a manual back in 2007 on retrofitting that goes through all the methods in great detail. It's a great disciplinary tool for your children. Like if they don't do their homework, you tell them that you take away their phone and make them read this book, and they usually shape up in a hurry. I often use it on Cecilia. She's done such a good job today. So in terms of removal rates at this point of the day, I don't want to do a lot of math. We talked about it a little bit very early in this morning. But this in terms of we've talked about retrofit opportunities and finding them, but in the last analysis, we want to pick the retrofits that remove the most pollutants for the least cost. And so to do that, we can come up with a planning level cost estimate, but we need to know how much we're removing. So as you recall from this morning, we decide whether a retrofit is a runoff reduction or stormwater treatment. And we go to the curves that we talked about. And so with retrofitting, you want to do a couple things. You want to try to capture as much runoff depth as possible. So you get higher rates the more you get. But even the second thing you want to do is to try to do runoff reduction practices rather than stormwater treatment. But if you don't have a lot, the difference between the two isn't great. But the biggest thing you do to maximize removal is what? You want to treat as much drainage area as possible in a single facility. That's why pond retrofits are so attractive. That one that we showed earlier where you're getting 150 acres, even if the removal rate is 40%, and you're only getting so much treatment, you're multiplying that by a bunch of acres. Whereas, I'm using the runoff reduction practice, and I'm only treating 1 acre. Well, yeah, boo on you. So the expert panel came up with curves for nitrogen and sediment. And I'll go through one quick example, given the time, and then, but let's say we have a new facility. It's built. We've already said the stormwater treatment. It's estimated to be 1.67 acre feet. It treats runoff from a 50-acre residential neighborhood with 40% impervious cover. So the expert panel came up with an equation, or just based on that data, you solve for X, you put your runoff storage volume, which was your 1.67 acre feet, multiply it by 12, divide it by the impervious acre treated, which, just to go back, we had 50 acres, but only 40% were impervious cover. Here we got 20 acres, and lo and behold, we go to 1 inch. So you just go to 1 inch on the curves, and then it gives you your removal rate. You can go to figure out what the average loading rate is for the catchment. It tells you how much you've removed. So you have that data, you do the cost per acre, and rank all the projects accordingly. I'll show you which ones make the most sense. And it's a very important exercise because the cost of retrofits can range anywhere from about $5,000 per impervious acre to $250,000 per impervious acre. I've actually done some for like $1,000 per impervious acre. So if you have that range and you have limited money, which one would you pick, Cecilia?
I would pick the cheapest one that can give me the most pollutant reduction, that has the least utility conflicts.
Damn it. You've been listening.
You've done this before, haven't you?
So basically, I showed you how you computed the removal rates, but your consultant or you would have to figure out the area, the loading rates, removal rate, and the load removed. But they're very simple calculations once you've done it a couple of times. These examples too, boy, you getting that? Whew. I just felt it would be criminal to show you more design examples in this cold room because our minds are freezing up.
It's better than
Anyway,
baking.
the retrofit process is fairly interesting. And does anybody have any questions or ideas about applying it to their community? Well, hearing none.
And we made that fact sheet. I think some of you might have seen the fact sheet for retrofit. I think this side of the room got the retrofit fact sheet. I don't know if that side of the room did. But there'll be a part on the webpage, a part in the package of things you can download. So hopefully it takes you through basically what we just discussed without having to go into the whole report.